Vancouver, late 90s. The rain drizzled softly against the window panes as Christian reclined on the sofa, his body sinking into the worn leather cushions. The day had been long, but it was finally over. His wife had called to say she'd be late at work. Something about a last-minute meeting with her team, and Christian decided to spend the evening alone, lost in the hum of late-night television. With a sigh, he lazily set the sleep timer on the TV and stretched out, letting the dim light of the screen wash over him. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves, casting faint shadows across the living room. He closed his eyes and began to drift off into that liminal space between wakefulness and sleep. Just as Christian was on the edge of sleep, something stirred his senses, something subtle, almost imperceptible. The sleep timer clicked, and the TV screen blinked off, plunging the room into darkness. But in that moment, a strange feeling washed over him. His eyelids fluttered open, and in the faint glow of the streetlights outside, he saw it. In the black reflection of the TV screen, a woman sat at the foot of the couch. Christian's heart lurched in his chest. He froze, staring at the image, unable to fully process what he was seeing. The woman's form was faint, barely there, but undeniably real. She was seated at his feet, her back turned to him, her posture rigid. His breath hitched in his throat and his mind raced. Before he could react, before he could fully grasp the situation, the reflection vanished. Christian bolted upright, his eyes darting to the foot of the couch. There was nothing there, just the rumpled throw blanket and the empty living room. He stood quickly, his heart pounding, and scanned the room. The windows were closed, the door locked. Everything was exactly as it had been moments ago, except for the lingering feeling of something wrong. Then the smell hit him. It was faint at first, just a whiff, but unmistakable. Sweet and sickly, with an underlying rot that clawed at his senses. Christian gagged as the memory surged forward, unbidden. He had smelled this before, years ago, in a morgue during a university visit. The unmistakable stench of death. But why here? And why now? Trying to steady himself, Christian reached for his phone and checked the time. His wife, Mary, should have been home by now. He hadn't heard from her since her last call hours ago. He dialed her number, his fingers trembling slightly as the ringing echoed in the quiet room. It rang once, twice, 3 times, but there was no answer. His stomach tightened. Mary always picked up. Always. He dialed again, but still, the call went straight to voicemail. That gnawing sense of dread began to settle in his chest, heavy and suffocating. Something was wrong. As the minutes dragged on, Christian's thoughts spiraled. The image of the woman on the couch kept replaying in his mind, her presence lingering in the corners of his vision like a shadow that wouldn't leave. He couldn't shake the feeling that he had seen her before, somewhere, somehow. But where? Suddenly, a memory surfaced. It was vague, but chilling. A woman from a news report, a missing persons case from years ago. Her name had been Eliza, and she had vanished under mysterious circumstances. The search had gone cold, and her body was never found. The last anyone had seen of her was a grainy CCTV image of her getting into a car. Christian shuddered. Could it be her? Was he seeing things, or was this something more than just a figment of his imagination? Hours passed. Christian sat in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. His nerves were frayed, and he had begun pacing the house. He glanced out the window, expecting to see Mary's car pulling into the driveway, but the street remained empty. His phone vibrated in his pocket, a message from a coworker, but nothing from Mary. As he turned back toward the living room, the hairs on the back of his neck stood on end. His eyes landed on the couch. There, at the foot of it, was the woman again. This time, she was facing him. Her face was pale and lifeless, her eyes sunken and hollow. Her lips were twisted into a faint, sorrowful smile. Christian froze, paralyzed by fear. He couldn't move, couldn't speak. The air around him grew colder, and the scent of death grew stronger, wrapping itself around him like a suffocating blanket. Then, as quickly as she had appeared, she was gone. Christian's mind raced. He had to know what was happening. Was this woman a ghost? A figment of his imagination? Or something worse? His thoughts were frantic as he searched for clues, anything that could explain what was happening. He rummaged through old files, newspapers, anything he could find that would jog his memory about Eliza or the news report. His search led him to the basement, where Mary kept boxes of old documents and papers. Among the dust-covered files, Christian found something strange, a folder labeled Eliza. His blood ran cold. Why would Mary have this? The folder was thick, filled with newspaper clippings, printouts, and handwritten notes. The headline from the missing persons case was splashed across the front page. Eliza Moore missing for 3 months, family begs for help. Christian's hands shook as he flipped through the articles, piecing together the story of Eliza's disappearance. But the further he read, the more unsettling it became. Mary had taken notes, detailed, obsessive notes, about Eliza's case. There were strange markings on the margins, and certain parts of the articles were underlined with a heavy hand. It was as if Mary had been trying to solve the case herself. But why? Christian's mind buzzed with questions. What had Mary been involved in? And why hadn't she told him? Lost in thought, Christian was startled by a loud, rhythmic knock on the door. It was midnight, and the sound echoed eerily through the house. He jumped, nearly dropping the folder. He stood still for a moment, unsure of what to do. Another knock, louder this time. Christian approached the door cautiously. His heart raced as he opened it just a crack, peeking outside. There was no one there. He stepped onto the porch, scanning the empty street. The wind howled through the trees, but there was no sign of movement. He turned to go back inside and froze. There, standing in the yard, was the woman. The woman stood under the dim glow of a street lamp, her white dress fluttering in the wind. Her face was gaunt, eyes dark and hollow. This time, she didn't vanish. She stared at Christian, her mouth moving as if trying to speak, but no sound came out. For the first time, Christian found his voice. "What do you want?" he shouted, his fear boiling over into anger. The woman's lips trembled, and for a moment, Christian thought he saw a tear roll down her pale cheek. Then she whispered, barely audible, "Help me." The words sent a chill down Christian's spine. He stood frozen, unsure of what to do. Help her? How could he help a ghost? And what did she want from him? The next morning, Christian tried calling Mary again. Still no answer. He had to find her. He needed to know what she had uncovered about Eliza, and how it was connected to everything happening around him. He went through her phone records, tracking down the last calls she had made before she went silent. His heart stopped when he saw the last number she had dialed. It was Eliza's family. Christian wasted no time. He drove to the address linked to the number, hoping to find answers. Eliza's family had lived in a secluded house on the outskirts of Vancouver. The drive felt endless, his mind racing with questions and fears. When he arrived, the house was old and weathered, much like the cabin he and Mary had rented years ago. He knocked on the door, and an older woman answered. Her eyes were bloodshot, her expression weary. "Are you here about Eliza?" she asked, as if she already knew. Inside, the woman revealed that Mary had been visiting them for months, asking questions about Eliza, probing into her disappearance. Mary had become obsessed with solving the mystery, even visiting psychics and mediums in an attempt to communicate with the dead. Christian's stomach churned as the pieces fell into place. His wife had been investigating the disappearance behind his back, driven by something darker than mere curiosity. But why? What had she found? The woman's next words hit him like a punch to the gut. Mary thought Eliza wasn't missing. She thought Eliza was dead, and that her spirit was trying to reach out to us. Christian's mind raced. Mary had been searching for answers, and she had gotten too close. But where was she now? And what did Eliza's spirit want? Just as Christian was about to leave, the woman handed him a small, tattered envelope. "Mary left this for you," she said. Inside was a note, written in Mary's hurried handwriting. Christian, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I've gone too far. I know the truth now, and I'm going to find her. If I don't come back, you'll know where to find me. Christian raced back home, fear gnawing at him. As soon as he arrived, he found the house eerily silent. He checked every room, but there was no sign of Mary. In the basement, he found the last piece of the puzzle, a hidden door behind the shelves. Inside, there was an old, dusty room, and there, sitting in the corner, was Eliza's body, skeletal and decayed, her eyes still hauntingly open. And next to her, Mary, lying motionless. Christian screamed as the stench of death filled the room once more.